The lights are blinding. The crowd is roaring. And behind those masks, something is breaking. It's 2009, and Slipknot is standing on top of the metal world. All Hope Is Gone has climbed the charts, the shows are sold out, and the band's image as a chaotic, unstoppable force seems untouchable. From the outside they are invincible. But behind the curtain, away from the screams and the pyro, the cracks are already there, spreading silently, cutting deep. If this story's already got you curious, hit like and subscribe. What's coming next is even more intense. You can almost picture it. Backstage corridors littered with empty bottles, the air thick with tension. A few members barely speaking to each other, some avoiding eye contact altogether. In interviews, the smiles are rehearsed, the laughter short and hollow. Something unspoken lingers in the room. Slipknot was never a band built on peace. Their music thrived on rage, pain, and catharsis. But now, that same fire was starting to consume them from within. Creative differences that once fueled their intensity were turning into walls. Personal struggles that were kept private for years were bleeding into the music, and into the relationships that held the nine together. No one in the audience that night could guess that they were watching a band on the edge of a cliff. And perhaps, neither could the band themselves. The All Hope Is Gone tour wasn't just physically exhausting, it was emotionally corrosive. Months of endless travel, relentless performances, and the crushing pressure to live up to their own myth were taking their toll. Slipknot's shows had always been violent and cathartic, but now that chaos was starting to spill over in ways no one had planned for. And at the center of it all was Joey Jordison, one of the founding pillars of the band. The man behind the furious, relentless drumming that defined Slipknot's sound. To the fans, Joey was untouchable. But inside the machine, his role, and even his place in the band, was starting to be questioned. Something was coming. A fracture. A decision that would shock millions and leave wounds that never truly healed. But before we reach that moment, before we watch a friendship and a brotherhood splinter apart, we need to go back. To the point where the machine was running at full speed, but the warning lights were flashing in the dark. Because the day Slipknot almost ended, didn't happen in a single moment. It wasn't one fight, one headline, one explosive argument. It was a slow burn, a silent war fought behind the masks, far from the crowd's eyes. And to truly understand how one of the most powerful bands in modern metal came this close to collapsing, we need to step inside that world. The world where success feels like a cage. Where the louder the crowd screams, the quieter the band's voice becomes. And where, sometimes, the heaviest thing you carry isn't the music. The year is 2008. The world is different. Metal is fighting to keep its place in the mainstream, the industry is shifting, and Slipknot is about to release the most divisive record of their career. 8 years have passed since their self-titled debut erupted like a grenade in the late 90s metal scene. Back then, they were the masked outsiders from Des Moines, Iowa, a violent storm of noise and fury that no one knew how to categorize. By 2001's Iowa, they were feared and worshipped in equal measure, their music darker and more punishing than anything on the radio. In 2004, Volume 3, the subliminal verses, cracked the code, keeping the brutality, but weaving in melody and experimentation. That album pushed Slipknot into arenas, festivals, and headlines worldwide. By 2008, expectations were astronomical. Fans wanted heavier. The label wanted bigger. The band wanted control. All Hope Is Gone was recorded in the summer heat of their home state, an attempt to recapture a sense of unity, far from the corporate recording studios and industry politics. But even here, the fractures were showing. Members disagreed on the album's direction. Should it be a brutal return to Iowa-level heaviness, or should they evolve into something more dynamic and accessible? What was meant to be a creative homecoming became a battleground of ideas. Still, when the album dropped in August 2008, it was an instant commercial success. It debuted at #1 on the Billboard 200, their first album to do so. Songs like Psychosocial became anthems, dominating rock radio and igniting mosh pits across the globe. For the fans, Slipknot had never been bigger. For the band, the pressure was just beginning. The All Hope Is Gone World Tour was a marathon. A relentless 2-year cycle that would take them to stadiums and festivals in over 30 countries. The shows were intense, the crowds massive. But night after night, the same faces under the masks were becoming strangers to each other. The grind of touring was nothing new. Slipknot had built their career on punishing schedules, but this time there was something heavier in the air. Off stage, the members were splintering into smaller circles. Some were focused purely on the performance, others on side projects, and a few just wanted to survive the endless cycle. The camaraderie that had fueled the early years was harder to find. Even the mask, once a symbol of unity, started to feel like armor. And then there was Joey Jordison. The heartbeat of the band, both literally and creatively. He had been there since the very first demo tapes. His precision, speed, and songwriting shaped Slipknot's DNA. But in the background, Joey was dealing with personal challenges that few outside his closest circle knew about. His role in the band was secure, or so it seemed. As 2009 turned to 2010, the all hope is gone era became a paradox. A period of record-breaking success and internal instability. They were playing to the biggest crowds of their lives, and yet the seeds of collapse had already been planted. When you look back now, the signs are painfully clear. But in that moment, for the fans in the pit and even for some members on stage, it felt like Slipknot could go on forever. They couldn't. On the surface, the all hope is gone era looked unstoppable. Slipknot was selling out arenas, headlining major festivals, and proving to the world that a masked metal band from Iowa could sit at the very top of the charts without compromising their identity. Every night was a storm of fire, chaos, and precision. To the fans in the crowd, the band seemed as tight as ever. But behind the scenes, small cracks were beginning to widen. The trigger wasn't one single explosion, it was a series of moments, disagreements, and tensions that started to pile up like gasoline waiting for a spark. One of the first signs came during the recording sessions themselves. Members clashed over creative direction. Some wanted to push into more experimental, melodic territory, while others insisted on going heavier, faster, more aggressive, a return to the brutal spirit of Iowa. The studio, which was supposed to be a refuge, became a pressure cooker. It didn't help that by 2008, Slipknot wasn't just a band anymore, it was an empire. Side projects were flourishing. Corey Taylor had Stone Sour, Joey Jordison was drumming with other bands, Sean "Clown" Crayon was diving into art and filmmaking. For the first time, the members weren't living in the Slipknot bubble full-time. This new distance, combined with different creative visions, made unity harder to hold onto. Touring amplified everything. The schedule was brutal. Months on the road with little rest, crossing continents in a haze of flights, hotels, and endless sound checks. Fatigue set in. Communication broke down. On stage, the nine moved like a single machine, but off stage there were silences that spoke louder than words. And then there was Joey. The fans didn't know it, but Joey was dealing with a serious, undiagnosed neurological condition that was slowly affecting his playing and his health. He pushed through the pain, refusing to miss shows, refusing to admit weakness. 4 years, Joey had been Slipknot's engine, not just the drummer but a key songwriter and creative driver. Now that engine was under strain. Some bandmates noticed, others ignored it, but everyone felt the shift in energy. The first visible sparks of tension appeared in interviews. Small comments, half-jokes, and offhand remarks hinted at deeper frustrations. Corey Taylor spoke about the difficulty of keeping 9 strong personalities aligned. Clown mentioned disagreements in the creative process. Joey, usually diplomatic, seemed more guarded. To the outside world, these were just normal band dynamics. But for Slipknot, they were the early tremors of something bigger, an emotional earthquake that was coming. And once it started, it wouldn't be stopped. Enjoying it? Then hit the like button and subscribe to catch the next stories. It didn't happen overnight. But once the fractures started showing, they spread fast. By the midpoint of the All Hope Is Gone tour, Slipknot was operating on pure momentum, the kind that feels unstoppable until you realize it's pulling you toward a cliff. The schedule was merciless, back-to-back shows, grueling travel, barely enough time to recover from one night before being thrown into the next. Fatigue became a permanent state. Irritability followed close behind. The first real signs that something was wrong weren't in the music, they were in the spaces between it. Backstage, conversations grew shorter. Some members retreated to their own corners, traveling separately, skipping after-show hangs. The chaotic brotherhood that had fueled Slipknot since the late 90s was now fraying at the edges. Joey Jordison, the rhythmic heartbeat of the band, was struggling silently. His physical pain was worsening. At the time, he didn't know he was dealing with a rare neurological disorder, but he knew something was off, and so did those around him. He was still delivering crushing performances every night, but behind the kit, the toll was starting to show. Joey's perfectionism wouldn't allow him to admit it. Instead, the pressure to keep up appearances only deepened the stress. The band's creative differences, once contained to studio debates, began spilling over into the tour itself. Setlists became a battleground. Some wanted to push the new material harder, others wanted to lean into the old hits that fans screamed for. Even simple decisions, like what song to open with, could turn into heated arguments. Tensions weren't just internal. Outside forces were pressing in. The label wanted a certain image maintained. Management pushed for longer tours, bigger shows, more media appearances. Slipknot had become a brand, and the business of Slipknot didn't care about the emotional cost to the people behind the masks. In interviews, Corey Taylor tried to keep it professional, but cracks showed. He would later admit that during this period, the band members were barely speaking off stage. Sean Crane's cryptic comments hinted at deep personal disagreements. Joey remained mostly silent in public, but his absence from certain moments was becoming noticeable. The moment that some fans point to as the beginning of the end wasn't a fight, but a feeling. A show in Europe where the performance was tight, the crowd was electric, yet backstage no one spoke. No celebration, no post-show adrenaline high. Just a quiet, almost eerie stillness. For a band built on raw emotion and violent energy, that silence was more dangerous than any shouted argument. Because silence in Slipknot didn't mean peace. It meant something was about to break. Every storm has a moment when the wind shifts, when the scattered clouds gather into something too big to ignore. For Slipknot, that moment came in a blur of exhaustion, creative friction, and unspoken resentment. By the latter half of the All Hope Is Gone tour, the band was functioning like a machine running on failing parts. Out front, the show still looked ferocious. 9 masked figures still tore across the stage like predators. The pyro still shook the ground. The fans still screamed themselves hoarse. But behind the curtain, the damage was accelerating. Arguments that once burned out in a few minutes now dragged on for hours. The tone was sharper, more personal. It wasn't just about music anymore, it was about trust. It was about who was showing up and who wasn't. Who still cared and who was already halfway out the door. Joey Jordison, still refusing to reveal the true extent of his health struggles, became a lightning rod for frustration. There were whispers. Was he losing focus? Was the pain affecting his performance? Was he more committed to outside projects than the Slipknot cause? None of it was being talked about openly in the room, but in the shadows the questions festered. The exact breaking point is still debated among fans. Some point to a tense backstage confrontation in the US, where raised voices spilled into the hallway. Others believe it happened during a run of European dates, when the band reportedly went several days without a real conversation. Whatever the precise moment, one thing is certain. The bond that had once made Slipknot bulletproof had been compromised. And then the unthinkable happened, not on stage but in the band's internal communication. A decision was made. Joey would not continue with Slipknot. Whether it was mutual, forced, or somewhere in between has been the subject of endless debate. What is clear is that it wasn't handled the way a 15-year brotherhood should end. The news didn't come in a face-to-face meeting. It came in an announcement. Public. For fans, it was a gut punch. Joey wasn't just the drummer, he was a founding architect of Slipknot's sound. His departure felt like the removal of the band's spine. But inside Slipknot, the move was seen, at least by some, as necessary for survival. Still, survival has a cost. In that moment, the Slipknot that had stormed the world in 1999 was gone. The masks were still there. The name was still there. But something in the soul of the band had been permanently altered. And the world was about to find out. When the news broke, it was like a shockwave ripping through the metal community. Joey Jordison was gone from Slipknot, and no one had seen it coming like this. The band's official statement was brief, almost sterile, citing personal reasons for his departure. There was no joint interview, no farewell moment on stage, no hug for the fans to witness. Just a press release that read more like a corporate memo than the ending of a 15-year bond forged in blood, sweat, and distortion. Fans were stunned. Many refused to believe it at first, assuming it was a rumor, some kind of PR stunt, or a temporary break. But when Joey issued his own statement, revealing that he had been fired and that he never wanted to leave, the narrative shifted. Suddenly, this wasn't just a change in lineup. It was a fracture, raw and public. The backlash came fast. Social media lit up with anger, confusion, and grief. Longtime Maggots, Slipknot's fiercely loyal fanbase, demanded answers. Theories exploded. Was it about money? Was Joey's health the real reason? Had personal conflicts reached a breaking point? The lack of detail only fueled the fire. Inside the band, the wounds ran even deeper. Members were forced to carry on without the man who had co-written some of their most iconic songs, the drummer whose speed and precision had defined their sound. And it wasn't just about replacing his skill, it was about trying to rebuild trust in a family that felt betrayed. On stage, the first shows without Joey were strange. The new drummer was masked, but everyone knew it wasn't him. Corey Taylor admitted in later interviews that those initial performances were emotionally brutal. Slipknot's music had always been fueled by rage and catharsis, but now there was something else in the mix. An ache, a sense of absence that no amount of noise could drown out. For Joey, the scars were even more personal. He had to watch from the outside as the band he helped create moved forward without him. The pain of losing that brotherhood, combined with his ongoing health battle, became a defining shadow over the next years of his life. Though he pursued other projects, Murder Dolls, Scar the Martyr, Vimic, fans could still hear the loss in his voice when Slipknot's name came up. Slipknot survived the split, but not without cost. The departure left a permanent mark on the band's history, a dividing line between before and after. And for many, the question lingered: could they ever truly heal from this? The masks remained, the chaos remained, but the soul had been altered. And in the years to come, the ghosts of this moment would return, sometimes quietly, sometimes loudly, to haunt them. The years following Joey Jordison's departure were a strange blend of survival and reinvention for Slipknot. Publicly, they projected strength. Privately, they were still stitching up wounds. The first real sign of reconstruction came with the release of The Grey Chapter in 2014, an album that carried the dual weight of Joey's absence and the devastating loss of bassist Paul Gray just 4 years earlier. The record wasn't just new music, it was a statement of endurance. Slipknot could still make something brutal, something alive, even with a hole in their foundation. But this rebirth wasn't without its ghosts. In interviews, Corey Taylor and Sean "Clown" Crayon spoke cautiously about Joey's exit, never diving into the specifics. They hinted at deeper issues, personal and professional, but stopped short of laying it all bare. The ambiguity kept the fanbase divided. Some accepted that Slipknot had to move forward. Others felt the wound had never truly healed because the truth remained in the shadows. Meanwhile, Joey rebuilt in his own way. He poured himself into side projects, spoke candidly about his love for Slipknot, and, in a heartbreaking revelation, disclosed his struggle with transverse myelitis, the neurological condition that had impaired his ability to play drums at the peak of his career. This admission reframed the narrative for many fans. The falling out wasn't just about internal tensions, it was tangled with the devastating reality of a body betraying its owner. And yet, even as years passed, there were moments that hinted at lingering connection. Joey praised his former bandmates in interviews, saying he wished them nothing but success. Corey, too, would occasionally speak of Joey with a mixture of respect and sadness, acknowledging his monumental contribution to the band's legacy. On stage, Slipknot's shows regained their ferocity. The new members had found their place and the band's identity evolved, different but undeniably Slipknot. Still, there was an unspoken understanding among the fans. No matter how powerful the performance, the shadow of what happened in those final all hope is gone days would always hover. Then came the cruel twist of fate, Joey's death in July 2021. The news hit like a second rupture, reopening wounds that had never fully closed. Slipknot's tribute was brief but heartfelt, a quiet acknowledgement of a brother lost. For many, it was a reminder that the story of Joey and Slipknot wasn't one of clean endings or simple resolutions. In the end, the reconstruction wasn't about erasing the past, it was about carrying it. Slipknot had survived, but survival meant living with the echoes of what had been lost. And for the fans, the band's resilience was forever intertwined with the knowledge of how close it had come to falling apart for good. Looking back, the story of Slipknot's near collapse during the all hope is gone era isn't just a tale of conflict and loss, it's a raw portrait of human fragility beneath the masks. Slipknot, as a band, has always been about channeling pain, anger, and chaos into something explosive and cathartic. Their identity was built on extremes, sonic brutality matched by emotional intensity. But beneath the aggressive exterior was a complex web of relationships, vulnerabilities, and unspoken struggles. Joey Jordison's departure revealed how even the strongest bonds can crack under pressure. It showed the cost of living in a world where success demands constant performance, where personal health and well-being are often sacrificed for the sake of the show. His story reminds us that behind every legendary figure lies a human being, flawed, fighting, and sometimes falling. For the band, the experience was a crucible. They faced the impossible choice between holding on to what was breaking them or letting go to survive. The decision to move forward without Joey was painful and imperfect, leaving scars that never fully healed. Yet, it also revealed a resilience that few bands possess, the ability to rebuild and create meaning out of loss. For the fans, this chapter of Slipknot's history is bittersweet. It challenges the black and white narratives of band loyalty and betrayal, forcing us to confront the messy, complicated reality of artistic collaboration and personal struggle. It asks us to accept that sometimes, even the most beloved bands face fractures that can't be neatly repaired. And still, through it all, Slipknot endures. Their masks may hide their faces, but their music, raw, relentless, and honest, continues to speak the truths they can't always say aloud. The day they nearly ended wasn't the end of their story. It was a painful, necessary chapter in the evolution of a band that refuses to be broken. In the silence behind the noise, there is a lesson. That strength isn't the absence of vulnerability, but the courage to face it head-on. Slipknot's journey through collapse, loss, and reconstruction stands as a haunting testament to that truth. A reminder that sometimes the heaviest burden a band carries isn't the weight of their sound, but the weight of their own humanity.